This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Well, hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Uncorking a Story. I'm Mike Carlin, and I'm so happy to have you with me as I uncork another great story. I want to remind you to please follow Uncorking a Story on all socials, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. You can find us at Uncorking a Story on all of those platforms. And if you only listen to Uncorking a Story as an audio podcast, I encourage you to please watch us on YouTube, as it's a great way to leave feedback for each episode, as well as get each episode ad-free. So I encourage you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel by going to YouTube, searching for Uncorking a Story, and hitting subscribe. For you audio listeners out there, please subscribe, rate, and review Uncorking a Story wherever you get your podcast. Now, today on the show, we have author and screenwriter Iris Yamashita, who dreamed about being a writer from a very young age, but went to school for engineering. Talk about pivoting. We get into how she transitioned from being an engineer to working in Hollywood as a screenwriter, and why she once again pivoted to writing novels. The big takeaway from this one, though, is that it's really never too late for you to start writing. In fact, many of the authors that I speak with who had success later in life tell me that there's no way they could have written something publishable when they were younger. Sometimes ideas just need more time to marinate, and sometimes you just need more life experience in order to find the inspiration you need to write something meaningful. So it's never too late to flex and strengthen that writing muscle of yours. So to borrow a phrase from Nike, just do it. As a reminder, my goal on Uncorking a Story is to help you become a better writer. And today's lesson is this: don't let your age be an excuse for not putting some words on the page. I'll say it again, just do it. Now, let's uncork Iris Yamashita's story. Iris Yamashita is an Academy Award-nominated screenwriter for the movie Letters from Iwo Jima. She has been working in Hollywood for 15 years, developing material for both film and streaming, has taught screenwriting at UCLA, and is an advocate of women and diversity in the entertainment industry. She joins me today on Uncorking a Story to talk about her career and latest novel, Village in the Dark. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Iris.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here, Iris, and I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
Well, I think probably like a lot of authors, I've always wanted to write since I was a little kid, and I was writing in the first diary I got. I thought it was supposed to write about a fictional version of myself, so I put myself in like the 19th century, and I don't think that's what I was supposed to do. But I have Asian parents, so I actually majored in engineering. But I always kept writing as a hobby. It was my minor. And then after I graduated with 2 engineering degrees, I still continued to take night classes in writing. And so while I was working during the day, at night, I was taking creative writing classes. I was trying to write a novel, but I had a hard time actually finishing a novel. So then everybody in California is writing a screenplay. So I thought, well, let me give that a try. And so I started taking classes in screenwriting, and I actually could finish screenplays. And then I started entering contests with with my finished screenplays, and I won a contest where one of the judges was an agent at the Creative Artists Agency, which is CAA, which is like a huge talent agency, and then that's how I got my foot in the door and eventually got a job writing for Clint Eastwood, which was amazing. But I think what happened was I kind of got pegged into this hole of being the Asian historical writer. And so I kind of wanted to break out of the box. And the only way to do that, I thought, was to change media. So I had written a fantasy for Disney, and it actually had a run. It was a musical stage show, and it had a run at Tokyo Disney Sea. And then now I've jumped into books, and now I can write contemporary murder mysteries. So it's been really fun.
Well, I'm curious, you mentioned having 2 engineering degrees. How do you go from kind of wanting to be a writer to kind of becoming an engineer? Because I think many people listening might be like, those 2 things just don't go hand in hand. Although I have to say, I know there is a lot of creativity that might have to go into engineering. But just tell me a little bit about your decision to pursue engineering.
I had Asian parents who's not like the only jobs I could be, was I did bioengineering first because they wanted me to be a doctor. So I was thinking maybe pre-med bioengineering. And then after a dog lab, I said, no, I can't do that. I don't think I'm made for being a doctor. So I then switched to mechanical engineering. And I don't know if there's the only overlap I can think of is sometimes like when you're programming and you have to come up with the code and you don't know how you're going to do it. And you have to kind of you have a task and you have to do it. And it's so that kind of work ethic maybe crossed over, but I'm really not sure why.
Yeah. I remember I had the good fortune of interviewing Tess Gerritsen a few times over the years, and she created the Rizzoli Isles series and has gone on to written many medical thrillers as well as other types of books. And she told me, having Asian parents as well, she was discouraged from pursuing anything creative as a career. She actually wanted to join the FBI at one point, and somebody told her that the FBI doesn't take women into the FBI. And then I think she wound up founding having this wonderful career as a writer, but it all kind of started similarly with, hey, there are these other expectations for me that I have to follow. So it's almost like following someone else's dream for your life. When you were able to start writing and making a living writing, through your writing, what was that like? I mean, how was that? What changed in your life as a result of that?
Well, I quit my job, but I didn't quit my job until I had a contract in hand. So luckily, though, I had a boss who also wanted to be a writer, or my immediate boss also wanted to be a writer. And she also quit her job and also became a screenwriter. But she would sort of let me go on these meetings. I say, oh, I have this meeting with Clint Eastwood and I need to go. And she would let me leave the office. And so it all worked out. But my parents were not impressed. Because I said, when I told them I have a job with Clint Eastwood, they were like, who's Clint Eastwood? And so, so they weren't as thrilled as I was, because I was kind of, I already had left the house and everything. And so I hadn't been keeping them up to date as to what I was doing. But I think my dad finally came around when he sort of invited himself to the Academy Awards as my date. So after that, he was on board. But yeah, I was sort of being very pragmatic, and I thought, no, I can't make a living. I'm not going to quit until I have a contract in hand, and it's kind of certain that I can do this.
Well, I also want to talk about your transition from, screenwriting to writing a novel, and sort of the motivations behind that, and also like the biggest differences you've noticed between the two mediums, because I know they are very different. I know many novelists who have a hard time writing for the screen, like adapting their work for the screen. It is a different skill set. It's a different way of thinking, and I know the opposite is true too. I know many screenwriters who have had a hard time with novelization. So what was that sort of transition like for you?
I think for me, as I said, I had been taking night classes while I was working, so I already felt like I had gone through the learning process of writing a novel before I switched to screenwriting. But screenwriting was right; it was a whole different medium, and I had to learn the ropes on that. But coming back to novels wasn't as hard for me because I had already taken classes. But I taught screenwriting, and I can always tell the people who came from writing novels, and it is a learning process. You have to. It is completely different. Um, Even how you write a screenplay where you don't use complete sentences, where it's just sort of chopped up and just for quick reads. So there's definitely a learning process, and I do recommend, like, new writers, if you're coming from writing novels and you want to write screenplays, to take classes for sure, to learn the nuts and bolts. But I think learning screenwriting, though, also helped me cross back into writing novels, because I learned some new set of tools, such as, like a 3-act structure, and what goes into building characters. So when I came back to writing novels, I could actually finish, because I learned structure and outlining and a lot of other tool sets that helped me when I came back.
Yeah. So, what can you share with us about Village in the Dark?
So, Village in the Dark is the second book in my Kara Kennedy series. And the first book, called City Under One Roof, is where we're introduced to the protagonist, Detective Kara Kennedy. And she's haunted by the loss of her husband and her son, who she thought died in a hiking accident. And when in the first book, she goes to investigate a crime that she thinks might be related, and then solves it, and it's not related at all. But then at the very end of the first book, there's a clue that, well, maybe they are related somehow. And so in the second book, it begins with her actually digging up the graves of her husband and son, because she's gotten some information where she believes there's foul play involved. And she will have to go back to that city under one roof in Alaska, which is inspired by a real city where everyone lives in the same building, and there's only a one-way tunnel to go in and out. But I also introduce a new setting. It's an all-woman village, and so I both books I have sort of 3 voices. And for Village in the Dark, we have, of course, a protagonist, and then we have someone who lives in the city under one roof, who she's the innkeeper, and she's sort of an older Bonnie and Clyde type with, she has a checkered past. And then the third voice is a young woman from this Village in the Dark, which is an off-the-grid village that's run by women. And they all have to, it's unclear in the beginning how all their stories are connected. But through the mystery, you find out how they're related, and how they have to, how, like, Ellie and the innkeeper and the detective have to team up.
Well, it sounds very exciting. Now, is it advisable for readers to have read the first book before jumping into the second?
I think it would be more enjoyable if they started with the first book and then read the second book. I do try to kind of give a recap in the second book for people who haven't read the first book. But I think overall it probably would be a better read if you read the first one first.
Sure. I know you mentioned kind of going back into writing novels after writing screenplays was somewhat of a motivation because it sounds like you were pigeonholed perhaps when in writing screenplays because of kind of who you are and what you had written about before. Did you find it was more freeing to write novels than screenplays?
Yeah, definitely. I think screenplays, you're usually working off of someone else's IP. So maybe you're adapting a book or you're working on a remake of a film or there's the producer's vision or the producer's idea of something, and then you're the writer for hire. So that's how most of my projects have been, because it's very hard to just sell a original screenplay unless you're one of the big the top people in Hollywood. It's very hard to get an original screenplay produced. So most of the time you're working off of something else, and so writing a book it's very liberating because it's all your idea, it's your original content, and you're not trying to write someone else's vision. So in that sense, definitely, I think writing books is more liberating.
Yeah, I would imagine liberating, but at the same time, there's a lot more on your shoulders because this is your idea, and you have to champion it like across. I mean, I hate using sports metaphors, but across the finish line. I mean, it's like it's almost like more on your shoulders because there's not that producer, there's not that filmmaker out there. Although I suppose you do have agents and publishers who might play those roles as well.
Yeah, you definitely, when you're writing a book, you're everything. You're the director, the casting person, you're the set designer, you're all of that. So it is a lot more work. I kind of remember in the first book, I hadn't given a description at all of my protagonist, because in screenwriting, it's just you don't know who's going to get cast, so you just say like woman 40s or something, like that, very vague. Whereas in books, obviously, you have to describe everything that you're seeing. And so I hadn't described the protagonist, and they were coming up with the book cover. And the question was, what does she look like? And I thought, oh my goodness, I've never described her once. And I went back in and I edited and I added a description. But I would say with film, it's the problem also is in producing, because you do have so many people involved. You have a director, producer, cast, crew, and everything, and so it costs millions and hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes to produce a movie. Even low budget, it's like multiple millions and a lot of people involved. Whereas with a book, I think it's easier to have a finished product because it doesn't cost, it's not as much of an upfront investment as a film is. But then the problem is that there are a lot of books that come out every year. So, you're kind of competing with like 2 million other books.
Yeah.
So how do you rise above that? So that's kind of how I feel the difference is.
Yeah, I think like writing novels in many ways, authors are like small business owners or entrepreneurs because, and maybe even closer to an entrepreneurial mindset because you're trying to create a white space idea, something that is a fresh story, or in other words, like a fresh product, and you're responsible for the content of that product, building it. You're the assembly line or the manufacturing line. You're the, well, maybe you're not the cover designer, but certainly I'm sure you have input into it. And I know independent authors, a lot of them try and do that themselves, which I always advise against. But but it is almost like running a small business, because then you've got to promote it. Like once it's out there. And I know that publishers help a little bit with promotion, but for the most part, most authors, maybe not J.K. Rowling, but most authors are pretty much responsible for advertising and marketing, and getting the word out, building buzz and PR and all that stuff. It's challenging. It's very challenging. And anyone who thinks that being an author is like a life of ease is is sorely mistaken, I think.
No, you're absolutely right. That's the part that I'm still learning, is this marketing and promotion end, which is a lot of work. And I didn't know how much work goes into this. So that is totally new for me. Because when you're, in writing a film, I mean, you do a little bit, but not many people are that interested in the writer. They want to see the director and the actors, and so they bear the brunt of the in-person marketing and promotion, whereas the writers sometimes, but it's not as much work, and it's usually all set up for you by the studio. But yeah, you're absolutely right about with books. I definitely get a lot of help from the publisher, but right, you're constantly doing your social media, and you're writing essays and articles and all of that. And I
Right.
thought, oh my gosh, it's like another job.
Right. You're guest blogging, and yeah, just the social media part alone is that could be a full
Yeah,
time
I,
job.
I did not. I was not a social media person at all before writing the first book, and then now it's like, oh my gosh, I have to keep posting things, and my friends must, they must be absolutely sick of all my posts about the book.
Right. Do you still do any work in the film industry? Are you still doing any writing of screenplays, or?
Um, yeah, I had some projects, and then the strike came, and it kind of, then I was just, oh, I'm so glad I have the books, because that's what I was focusing on. But during the strike, I was approached for a audio series, and that, in this case, this audio series doesn't fall under the purview of the Writers Guild. So, because it's film and streaming and audio podcasts. There's a little gray area, and this it's BBC, so they're not even under the Writers Guild. So they gave me permission to work on the audio series. So I'm in the midst of that. It's like a 6-episode historical audio series for the BBC.
Well, that's
And
cool.
hopefully yeah, it's very cool. Hopefully they say they want to, have it air in this fall. So knock on wood. That
I love
happens.
I love a good podcast audio series. I just love how the production of them has really it's gotten very good. Just listening to a story told by audio, with the right narrator, with the right music, with the right editing, to me can be very, very captivating. I love it.
Yeah, I love exploring different media. As I said, like I'm just trying out a musical stage play, and then the books, and then now the audio. It's fun. It's fun to try different things.
Yeah. Well, I always like to ask my authors a couple of questions around pop culture, just to get to know them a little bit
Oh.
more. And I'm curious, thinking about your younger years, Iris, when you were a kid, did you have a favorite, TV show or movie that you enjoyed when you were a kid?
Um, like a kid. because I was going to say for my book, I wasn't a kid. I was in college, but the Twin Peaks
Oh
original
yeah,
Twin
yeah,
Peaks
yeah.
television series, I really loved, and that I think crept in as some influence into my two mystery books.
I remember. So
Uh,
I had a girlfriend from high school who, for Halloween, we were allowed to dress up for Halloween. For Halloween in school, she dressed up as Laura Palmer,
oh,
complete with like she tried to make like a garbage bag into like a body bag, and then she glued sand all over her face.
oh my God.
She was a very dedicated Twin Peaks fan at the time.
I was too. I actually went to Snoqualmie Falls where uh, the hotel was, and there was a waterfall. I went to visit it.
But yeah, a very groundbreaking TV show at the time. I mean, I don't remember there being really anything like that on TV at the time. It was really different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of is like what's, the streaming series now, but back then in television it wasn't usually like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
like a limited series kind of feel to it. It wasn't that yeah, it was usually episode of the week kind of, crime of the week kind of thing. So, yeah, I let me see. But as a kid, oh, did you say books or
Well,
film?
it could be books, film, movies, TV.
I always liked as a kid, I always liked the women writer books because that was inspirational to me. 'Cause it's like, like the Little Women, because there weren't many women writers in that time period. So, the Louisa May Alcott, and then I liked Anne of Green Gables because that was also a woman writer. So, those are things that I felt like helped me want to become a writer, knowing that there were women writers out there.
Yeah, those early influences, early motivations.
Yes.
What about music? Were you drawn to music as a kid?
Yeah, I liked all the 80s music stuff. David Bowie, Queen, all the great 80s hits. Those I loved them.
Then, of course, you've got Queen and David Bowie together doing Under Pressure. So,
Oh yes, I had that. I had that for sure. But I
um,
remember I was living in Guam for a while, and I was always sad because I could never see a concert because no one would visit Guam.
not big on the tour stops.
No,
That's right. Wham didn't quite make it to Guam back in the
no,
80s.
no one made it to Guam. I think the only band that came to Guam, and I didn't see them. I think I was too young. It was In Excess.
Oh,
I think
sure.
they and I don't even remember if they gave a concert or not. I just remember there was all this talk about In Excess coming to Guam.
It's a layover from the
Yeah,
airplane.
maybe it was just a layover. I don't know.
They needed a refuel, so they just stop in
Yeah,
Guam.
exactly.
Um, what have you learned about yourself as a writer? Just kind of going through the writing process, whether it's through screenplays or whether it's through your novels. What big insights did you have into yourself? As you're writing.
Huh, that's interesting. I think I don't plan to put in like my political thoughts or views, but they somehow do make it in there. And then people pick up on it, which I think I'm even more surprised about because I try to make it a little, I don't know, maybe I don't successfully make it subtle. Like I think it just comes out. But I have talked to people on the on the other side who were my test readers who got very upset over the smallest things, and I was like, wow, I'm really surprised that you were upset about that. And then I get like people who pick up on it, who are on, the same political spectrum as me, who are just like thrilled about what I wrote. So that's interesting. It's sort of like I think as an author, as a writer, we're supposed to sort of bring up questions, like ask questions, but not necessarily have the answers for it. And I guess I guess I do try to make some kind of statement, even though maybe I didn't originally intend to.
Yeah. I mean, it is a subconscious thing. I always like
Yeah.
to think, even if you're writing fiction, you leave a little bit of yourself on each page. And
Yes.
I think it's a subconscious kind of working something out. But yeah, in a way, I'm not surprised that somebody who might have an opposing political view will clue into that. Because I
Yes.
think that's just what our culture is, as sad as it might be. People are like clued into, oh, this person doesn't think the way I think, therefore I must attack. And
Yeah, because I have voices. I have three voices, and so obviously the voices have different political views. So I have the older lady, and then I have the young, who she's like in the first book, she's a young Asian woman. So obviously she has a very different viewpoint from an older white woman lady, and they have different political views, but just putting in her political view as a young person, that's what I got like complaint about from my test reader.
mhm,
And I just thought, but that's her. That's not me. I'm saying this is her POV. But clearly it's also where I stand. So maybe her POV came out like stronger than the other character. I'm not sure, but it was
it's
very interesting.
possible. But it is just a symptom of kind of where we are. And
Yeah.
it drives me nuts. Like anyone who thinks, just even if you just think a little bit different, I find that if you don't subscribe wholeheartedly to what somebody else believes, like they consider you an enemy sometimes. Of course, that's an extreme word, but it is just a symptom of where we are as a society. And as writers, we like to explore different points of view and different things. And I think we might be more open to other points of view, because we have to be empathetic and step into the shoes of other people as we're kind of going through a writing process, or thinking about characters, or developing characters. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I always think about, even when I'm writing, the enemy. Um, you want to step into their shoes and figure out why they think this way, or what made them this way. That's part of the writer's job, I think, and you try to find empathy with all sides and understand where everyone is coming from, I think.
Right. Right. And in a way, you've got to create, these antagonists who have something that one might be able to relate to. Um,
Right.
they may not, they may be horrible people, but you've got to be invested in your antagonist too, because
Yeah.
otherwise it can get a little boring, perhaps.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that is important.
I'm curious if you could go back in time and whisper some words of advice into your younger self. Maybe it's that younger Iris who's writing in that journal, writing fiction in a journal. It's meant to be, you know, uh, uh, a journal. What would you tell your younger self?
I think I would tell my younger self to try harder earlier. Because I started this career quite late. And so maybe, yeah, I think I didn't believe in myself as much. And so it's sort of, I think with a lot of authors, it's probably the same, where they're afraid to kind of try something new, or step into this scary world, and you just have to kind of believe in yourself and go for it.
I'm wondering, you mentioned starting, in the field a little bit later, do you think you would have been as successful if you pushed when you were younger, or did you need that time to really find your voice? And
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's not as good when people don't have experience experiences in other fields or have a job and um, just go straight into an MFA in writing and then from there just delve into writing. I mean, some people can do it, so kudos to them. But I think you're right in that I think as starting older, I probably handle rejection a little better. As opposed to, I think when you're young and it's like the end of the world, right? If you get a rejection, whereas I think when you get older, it's sort of, well, I'm still working. I do give that advice. I say, don't quit your day job. I mean, I think you can start earlier and, get your feet wet, but you don't have to quit your day job. And I've read a number of articles of very successful authors who said they continued working even 10 books in before they actually quit their day job. So because it is very scary to try to make money writing as your sole career. So I mean, I think if you're already wealthy or if you have a husband who can support you, that's great. But if you don't, it's definitely not easy. And so I always say to my students, keep your day job.
right, because being an author doesn't come with a 401k plan.
No, no. Yeah, that's the other difference in that the Writers Guild is part of a union. So when you're writing films, you do have you can get health insurance if you make a minimum. Whereas with writing novels, there's no union, there's no health insurance, and so I think it's harder to make money just writing novels. I think unless you're super super successful like Stephen King.
That's right. Yeah,
Um,
there's a handful. There's a handful, right? Who can make a really good living doing it. But then there's the rest of us who some of us
yeah,
day jobs.
but I think at this point I don't know how to do anything else. So and that's why I'm also, I think trying different media is great. And I kind of did an analysis of all the different kinds of writing. And my conclusion was that if you can make a living writing games, because then you're part of a company and you get all the benefits. Maybe that I've never tried that, and I think I'm too old, but maybe that's a way in because you can write creatively and you can work for a company and it's stable because it's an actual company because
There
even
you go.
screenwriting is unstable.
That's true. Well, just look. I mean, that writer's strike lasted longer than I think a lot of people thought it would have.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like with screenwriting, you're constantly interviewing. It's like every time you finish a project, then it's like you've lost your job and you have to go up for hire again. So you're interviewing again, and that's what it feels like. It's just like a constant. You're interviewing for a job, and it gets tiring.
Yeah. Well, Iris, where can people pick up a copy of Village in the Dark?
You can pick it up wherever books are sold. And if you're in California, I will be at Vroman's in Pasadena on February 13th, which is the release date. So look that up. But yeah, indie bookstores, anywhere your favorite bookstore, you can order online.
And if people want to learn more about you, do you have a website or some social media you can share with the audience?
Yes, my website is irisyamashita.com. The last name is YAMASHITA.com. And all my links to my social media are on the webpage.
Very good. I'll be sure to put all of that in our show notes so people can just look that up and tap on their phones or whatever device they're using to listen to this and look you up and buy your book. Iris, thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.